It was a single, minuscule speck, a drop of blood on the hand of a young woman whose life had been stolen. In the chaos and heartbreak of that night, it was almost invisible, a tiny mark that seemed to hold no answers. Yet in that one drop, the story of a crime was written in a language no one yet understood. It was a silent scream, a fragment of truth left behind in the darkness. For over 30 years this silent witness held a secret no one could hear. Tucked away in a box, sealed and labeled, it waited in the shadows of police storage rooms, untouched by time, but not forgotten by those who still hoped for justice. In 1969, forensics had no language for what that blood could reveal. The tools were primitive, the science still in its infancy. Investigators could only guess at what secrets the evidence might hold, relying on fingerprints, fibers, and intuition. Investigators collected every fiber, every clue, but the killer was a ghost. The city was gripped by fear, and the detectives worked tirelessly, piecing together fragments of a puzzle that refused to fit. That tiny bloodstain was just another unsolvable riddle. No name, no face, no motive. It was catalogued, photographed, and filed away, one more question in a case full of dead ends. So the evidence was preserved, catalogued, and stored away, a time capsule of a crime. It sat on a shelf gathering dust as the world outside changed and moved on. The world outside kept spinning, but the case grew colder with every passing year. New crimes took the headlines, new faces filled the precinct, but the memory of that night lingered in the minds of those who remembered. This drop of blood represents the strange dance between crime and technology. It is a symbol of how the past can wait patiently for the future to catch up, for science to find the words to tell its story. Sometimes the answers are right in front of us, but we lack the vision to see them. The detectives pored over files, retraced steps, and questioned witnesses, haunted by the feeling that something vital was just out of reach. The detectives did everything they could with what they had, chasing shadows, following leads. They worked late into the night, driven by a sense of duty and the hope that justice might still be possible. Little did they know, the key to the mystery was in that solitary drop of blood. It was a clue that would outlast them all, waiting for the day when science would finally unlock its secrets. It was a patient clue, waiting for its time. Decades would pass, but the evidence remained, untouched and unchanged, a silent promise that the truth would not stay buried forever. And one day, it would finally speak. When the world was ready to listen, that drop of blood would reveal the story it had carried for so long, a story of loss, of hope, and of the relentless pursuit of justice. Jane Mixer was more than a headline. She was a daughter, a friend, and a young woman with dreams that stretched far beyond the campus of the University of Michigan. Her story is often overshadowed by the tragedy that befell her, but to those who knew her, Jane was a vibrant presence full of hope and ambition. At just 23 years old, Jane was already making her mark as a law student. She was intelligent, driven, and kind, someone who believed in justice and wanted to make a difference in the world. Her professors admired her dedication, and her classmates often turned to her for advice or a comforting word. Jane was also engaged to a fellow student, G.K. Sorensen. Their relationship was filled with the promise of a shared future, and Jane was excited to take the next steps in her life with someone she loved deeply. She was about to share the joyful news of her engagement with her family, eager to see their reactions and celebrate together. Her parents and younger brother were the center of her world, and she looked forward to every visit home. On March 20th, 1969, Jane posted a handwritten note on the university ride board, hoping to find a way home to Muskegon for a short visit. It was a simple request, one that countless students made every week. The ride board was a system built on trust, a relic of a more innocent time when students relied on each other for help and believed in the goodness of strangers. It was a small gesture that spoke to the close-knit community of the era, but that note, meant to bring her home, would become a haunting artifact, a silent witness to her disappearance and the last trace of her intentions. Jane carefully packed her bags, left her apartment, and walked toward the meeting spot, expecting nothing more than a safe ride and a happy reunion with her family. Instead, she stepped into the unknown, her path crossing with someone she had never met. The world she knew, one of safety and trust, shifted in an instant. The ride she found that evening was not the one she had arranged. The person behind the wheel was a stranger, and Jane's fate was sealed the moment she entered that car. That car would take her far from her family, her friends, and the bright future she had worked so hard to build. In a matter of hours, everything changed. Jane's story is a powerful reminder of how quickly a promising life can be stolen away, and how the choices we make, no matter how small, can have lasting consequences. She was just a student, filled with hope, trying to share a happy secret with her loved ones. Her dreams were simple: to finish her studies, to start a family, to make a difference. But that day, her journey ended in tragedy, leaving her family and friends with questions that would haunt them for years to come. Jane Mixer's name would become part of a mystery that haunted Michigan for decades, a story of loss, heartbreak, and the search for answers that continues to this day. The next day, Jane's body was found over 150 miles from Ann Arbor in a rural cemetery. Two teenagers discovered her, shattering the peace of their small community. Jane had been shot twice in the head and strangled with a nylon stocking, a brutal, calculated act. The location was perplexing. Why bring her here? Law enforcement collected evidence, but the killer left no easy clues. It was as if a phantom had committed the act and vanished. For Jane's family, the news was a nightmare. The joyful announcement she'd planned was replaced by the grim task of identification. The community, already on edge, was plunged into deeper fear. The ride board, once a symbol of trust, now seemed dangerous. Who had she gotten into a car with, and why did it end in murder? At first, Jane Mixer's murder seemed to fit the pattern of the Michigan murders. 7 young women, abducted and killed. The community feared a serial predator, and all eyes were on John Norman Collins. Jane was young, bright, and her body was found in a remote area, just like the others. But crucial differences emerged. Jane had been shot. None of the other victims were. Serial killers often have a signature. The use of a gun was a glaring inconsistency. This suggested Jane's murder might be unrelated, a separate crime during a reign of terror. Law enforcement was left confused. One killer or two? Jane's case became an outlier, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Some investigators doubted the connection. This wasn't just another victim of the same monster. That difference would keep her case unsolved for decades. The Michigan murders cast a long shadow over Jane's case. Investigators focused on John Norman Collins, searching for any link to Jane. But no evidence ever materialized. No witnesses, no physical clues, no connection. Collins was convicted for another murder, but Jane's case hit a dead end. The public believed in a single killer, but the facts told a different story. Jane's file joined the ranks of cold cases, haunting detectives and her family. The evidence, stocking, clothing, and that drop of blood was stored away, waiting for a day when technology might finally give it a voice. For over 30 years, Jane Mixer's murder was a ghost story in Michigan law enforcement. Detectives came and went, the file occasionally reviewed but always returned to the shelf. The world changed, but in the evidence locker, time stood still. For Jane's family, the wait was agonizing, hope fading with each year. The investigation was dormant, every lead exhausted, every theory explored. The killer had vanished into the analog world, leaving only silent clues. But in the late 1990s and early 2000s, forensic science was revolutionized. DNA became the most powerful crime-fighting tool. Cold cases were reopened, and old evidence became a potential roadmap to the killer. Suddenly, Jane Mixer's evidence box was more than tragic mementos. It was a chance for answers. The decades of silence were about to end. In the early 2000s, a new era of forensic science was dawning. Investigators, determined to solve Jane Mixer's decades-old murder, turned to the rapidly advancing world of DNA technology. For years, the case had been shrouded in mystery, with leads growing cold and hope fading. But now, with the promise of modern science, detectives saw a glimmer of possibility. They carefully reopened the evidence boxes, examining every item preserved from the original investigation. Each piece was handled with meticulous care, as if it might finally reveal the truth that had eluded them for so long. The search was on for even the smallest trace that could point to Jane's killer. On a tiny blood spot found on Jane's hand, forensic scientists managed to extract a male DNA profile. It was a breakthrough moment, one that electrified the team. For the first time, they had a genetic fingerprint, a silent witness to the crime. The profile was entered into CODIS, the national DNA database, where it would be compared against thousands of known offenders. The anticipation was palpable. Everyone knew this could be the turning point. Then, a match appeared. Gary Leiterman, a retired nurse with a minor criminal record. His name had never surfaced in the investigation before, and his background offered no obvious connection to Jane. But the evidence didn't stop there. Leiterman's DNA was also discovered on Jane's pantyhose, further strengthening the link between him and the crime scene. The odds of such a match being a coincidence were astronomically low. Despite this, Leiterman had never been a suspect. He had no known relationship with Jane, no reason to cross her path, and no history that would have put him on investigators' radar. When confronted, Leiterman adamantly denied any involvement. He insisted he'd never met Jane Mixer, and could not explain how his DNA ended up on the evidence. But for the investigators, the science was compelling. The DNA results spoke louder than any alibi or denial, providing a clarity that years of interviews and speculation never could. After decades of silence and uncertainty, the case was finally moving forward. The sense of relief and determination among the team was unmistakable. News of the arrest sent shockwaves through the community. People who had long given up hope were suddenly confronted with the possibility of answers and justice. For Jane's family, the long, cold wait for justice seemed to be coming to an end. The pain of uncertainty was finally giving way to hope. The stage was set for a trial that would not only test the power of forensic science but also its limits, raising questions about memory, evidence, and the pursuit of truth after so many years. Gary Leiterman's 2005 trial was a battle of narratives. The prosecution had DNA in two places, proof, they said, that Leiterman was the killer. The DNA was the star witness, its testimony seemingly unassailable. The defense didn't dispute the DNA, but argued it was contamination, a lab mistake after decades in storage. Leiterman had no motive, no connection to Jane, and no one placed him near her in 1969. The defense argued it was more likely a lab error than a random, motiveless murder. The jury had to choose, trust the science or believe in human error. Ultimately, the DNA evidence was too strong. Leiterman was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Justice, it seemed, had been served. But a shadow of doubt lingered, fueled by another, even more mysterious piece of DNA. Leiterman's conviction wasn't the end. Forensic analysis had found a second unidentified man's DNA on Jane's clothing. This unknown profile matched no one in the database. Who was he? What was his role? Leiterman's lawyers argue this supports their theory of contamination and his innocence. They continue to fight for new DNA testing, hoping to identify this John Doe. The case remains legally active, nearly 2 decades after the conviction. Jane Mixer's story is a reflection on the evolution and limits of justice. The presence of that second DNA profile is a stubborn, unresolved fact. In the world of cold cases, sometimes the only thing more persistent than time is the hope for one more answer.